Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu sallam wa barak ala nabiyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So today what I wanted to do was give a few words on friendship and the importance of keeping good company. So one of the things that I've always loved about Islam is how comprehensive it is. Basically, being a good Muslim is not confined to just rituals that we do. And our religion is not confined to teaching us rituals and telling us that religion is just prayer, fasting, etc. But rather, our religion is a complete system, a complete way of life, and we can worship Allah by doing some of the most mundane and routine things outside, if you look at it from a non-Islamic perspective. And one example of being a devoted servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has nothing to do with prayer, fasting, or giving charity, etc., or something that we would not typically call worship if we were not Muslims, is keeping good company and choosing your friends wisely. In the hadith collected by Abu Dawood and At-Tirmidhi on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, الرجل على دين خليلي فلينظر أحدكم من يخالد. He said a person is likely to follow the faith, the ideology, the way of thinking and believing and behaving of his closest companion. So carefully consider the company you keep. Now the statement of the Prophet here, it has a number of implications. Like basically if you take a step back and you ponder it, there's a number of things that you can understand from what the Prophet is saying. One of the things that the Prophet is saying, or one of the implications of what he said, is that keeping good company and having good character, they go hand in hand. Having good character, keeping good company, they go hand in hand. Where one goes, the other follows. The second implication is that having good companions is essential for the achievement of fine morals, superb manners, and respectable conduct. As your friends go, or as your friends are, so will you be. And most of you, or some of you, may have grown up hearing your mother or your grandmother or someone in your family say, if you hang out with 9 broke friends, you're bound to be the 10th one, right? So as you are, so will your friends be. The third implication of what the Prophet is saying is that your companions influence you. They rub off on you. You have a tendency to imitate them, to resemble them, to adopt their manners and morals, to move the way they move. And your character often mirrors their character. And that's why it's incumbent, as the Prophet said at the conclusion of the hadith, فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مَنْ يُخَالِدْ. So be careful who you take as your friends. It's incumbent that we associate with people who we want to be like. And particularly who we want to be like in terms of their character, their conduct, and their religion. Now, this topic is an important one. And we know it's important because it's something which is mentioned repeatedly in the Quran and the Hadith. And I'm going to mention a couple of ayat and a few hadith that show what I'm talking about as far as Allah and His Messenger stressing and emphasizing being careful who we choose as friends and associating with the right people as opposed to associating with the wrong people. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah At-Tawbah, He says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَكُونُوا مَعَ الصَّادِقِينَ. He says, oh, you believe, fear Allah and keep company with those who are truthful. Telling you, look at the people you hang around with the truthful people, it's likely that you will be honest, you'll be truthful.
Can you turn on the mic for the sisters outside? My mom asked me.
Really, it's not on.
Yeah, I can't hear anything outside.
I do. Okay. So do you know how to turn it on?
No.
No, I don't either. But this guy does. He knows how to do everything.
He knows.
طيب.
Maybe you can speak, bring it closer.
The only reason I don't want to bring it closer is because it starts to echo really badly.
She's gonna go check it.
Okay. طيب. So as we said, this topic is really important. Allah stresses and emphasizes throughout the Quran how important it is for us to select, choose upright, righteous, pious people to be our companions, our friends. We mentioned the ayah from Surah At-Tawbah. We also have the ayah from Surah Al-Kahf, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ يريدون وجهه ولا تعد عيناك عنهم تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا ولا تطع من أغفلنا قلبه عن ذكرنا واتبع هواه وكان أمره فرطا. So he says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, and maintain yourself patiently in the company of those who call upon their Lord in the morning and the evening, seeking his face, and do not overlook them, seeking the pomp and glitter of the life of this world. So he's telling you in the beginning, associate with the people who are religious, who are committed. Even though they might not drive the fanciest cars, might not live in the best neighborhoods, might not have the most highly respected occupations, but they're good people. Associate with them. وَلَا تَعْدُ عَيْنَاكَ عَنْهُمْ تُرِيدُ زِينَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. And don't disassociate with them, overlook them, because you seek the pomp and glitter of this life. And obey not him whose heart we have made void of our remembrance. Again, don't associate with people who don't remember Allah. They don't love Allah. They're not religious people. And we have made their hearts void of our remembrance, and one who follows his own lusts and whose affair is one of negligence. Negligence in prayer, negligence in fasting. Doesn't really care about the deen. Don't make him your friend as opposed to the people who are good people, but they don't have things, right? In the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا تصاحب إلا مؤمنا ولا يأكل طعامك إلا تقي. He said, do not keep company except with a believer, and let only the pious eat your food. Again, same. Don't hang out with people who are not good people. When you give out these dinner invitations, a lot of people will invite, the powerful people, the influential people, the rich people. But they're not the most pious people. The Prophet is saying, let the invitation go to the people who are pious. وَلَا يَأْكُلْ طَعَامَكَ إِلَّا تَقِي. لَا تُصَاحِبْ إِلَّا مُؤْمِنٍ. Associate with the believers, not the non-believers. Etc. Why? Because the people you associate with, they have a great deal, they wield a great deal of influence on you. They influence you in ways sometimes we don't even realize. And this is not just true, brothers. Wa alaikum salam. This is not just true, brothers, for people. It's not just people that we associate that can influence us. Even things that you associate with and that you interact with can influence you. Consider the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Al-Fakhru wal-Khuyala fi ashab al-Ibn was-Sakinatu wal-Waqar fi ashab al-Ghanam. He said, pride and arrogance are traits which are exemplified by the raisers of camels. And he said, composure, calmness, level-headedness, dignity, these are traits exemplified by the raisers of sheep. The Prophet here, alayhi salam, is talking about animals and saying that the animals that we tend to, the animals that we care for, can influence our character. I want you to think about that for a second. An animal, you need a chair, Akhi?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Will one of you brothers kindly get the brother a chair?
I'm good.
You sure? So, think about that for a second now. Animals, An animal can't make suggestions. An animal can't tell you, hey, why don't you smoke the cigarette? Come on, let's go to the club. An animal can't do that. An animal can't argue with you and debate with you and put pressure on you to do anything. But still an animal can influence, as the Prophet is saying, the animals that you tend to can influence your behavior. If this is true for an animal, how much more true is it for people who can put pressure on you? They can threaten to embarrass you. They can threaten to deprive you of certain things that you need from this world. And they can influence you, suggest to you, encourage you. So if an animal can influence you, how much more can people influence you, individuals influence you? How much more can your environment influence you? And this is important because we live in an environment which is diametrically opposed to what we believe in. And here, just to show or give an example of the influence of the environment, I want to digress briefly and give an example. So, before I came here, I worked with some students from an MSA, a Muslim Students Association. And there was a point where the unity of this MSA was being threatened, and they were on the verge of dividing into two groups, maybe more than two groups, but it appeared that there were basically two main groups that they were about to splinter into. The first group, wa alaikum assalam, was that group which you could say they desired to be committed. That they basically believe that there are certain guidelines that we as Muslims are supposed to stay within, certain boundaries we're not supposed to exceed or transgress, and we need to stay within those boundaries. They believe that. Now they might differ with me and you about what those boundaries are, but they believe there are boundaries. They believed in these boundaries. And they wanted to try to stay within those as Muslim students on a college campus in a Western country. The other group, you could describe them as highly liberal and basically heritage Muslims. What I mean by heritage Muslims are people who were born Muslim. We're born into Muslim families. Our immediate family, our extended families are all Muslims. Islam is all we know as far as a faith is concerned. But we're not Muslims by choice. We're Muslims by chance. It just so happens. And Islam is not really the guiding light in our life. But it's kind of part of who we are. At least as far as we see it. Wa alaikum salam. So these two groups, the highly liberal versus the desiring commitment faction, they get into this highly tense, heated debate about a number of subjects. Among them, the highly liberal group was insisting that the more conservative group, if you will, would support the LGBT community. Somehow incorporate in what they do, their activities, their programming, etc., support for the LGBT community. Support for queer Muslims. What does support mean? You can just imagine what support could look like. Support is a very vague term, right? But you can imagine, what do they intend by supporting them? And they also wanted to cancel the conservative Muslims, to mute their voices, which basically means they wanted to ban any type of an amr bil ma'ruf wa nahi al munkar, commanding good and forbidding evil. So they have these groups, like group text, like WhatsApp or something. And somebody might say, hey, we had such and such event the other night and some of the sisters came and they weren't wearing hijab, and these are some ayat or some hadith to remind the sisters they need to dress modestly. Somebody might drop that in the group. They wanted people like that to be canceled, to be penalized. That they shouldn't be telling anyone what they can and can't do, what they should and shouldn't do. They shouldn't be telling anyone how to practice the deen. Everybody is free to interpret the deen and practice however they want. Everybody just come to the events And nobody should say anything to anyone as far as what's right and wrong in the deen. No nasiha. Even though the Prophet said, ad-deen an-nasiha. He said the religion is sincerity and giving sincere advice. They said, no, I want to cancel that. Al-Muhim, I'm sitting there, I'm watching this debate. As I'm watching it, I come to realize something. And that is that you have people, in this case young people, but it doesn't just apply to young people exclusively, it could be older people as well. People who've lived here in the West. They've been educated in the West, and in effect, they've been indoctrinated by the West. They've come to adopt and believe the ideology of the Western society, and basically that ideology for them determines what is right and what is wrong. They see everything through the lens of Western ideology, and what Western ideology and thinking and thought says is right, and what it says is wrong. They've adopted wholeheartedly these beliefs and this ideology. They're surrounded by this environment, and they've allowed themselves to be totally and completely influenced to the point that they take this square peg that is Islam and try to shove it in the round hole of Western ideology. And to the point that you find them, in the name of Islam, saying the exact opposite of what Islam says. We need to promote LGBTQ. We need to promote queer Muslims. We need to support them. We need to be on their side. And we need to do away with the amr bil ma'ruf and nahi al munkar. I'm asking you, isn't that the opposite of what Islam says? There's at least 10 verses in the Quran, or 10 passages, I should say, in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Qawm Lut, the people of Lot, what they did. He expresses disapproval, how he penalized them, punished them in this world for their crime. And he uses language which shows clearly that he totally disapproves of what they did, to the point he calls them mujrimeen, criminals. He calls them musrifin, people who transgress the bounds, etc. Does that sound like something Islam is for? But the Prophet ﷺ in a handful of a hadith, again, expressed his disapproval of this practice, the behavior. And the Muslims are mujmi'un. They are unanimously agreed that this is something that's totally wrong. But you have people arguing in favor of it in the name of Islam. Because why? Because they've been influenced by their environment, which is why the Prophet said in the hadith, it's part of the meaning of what the Prophet said in the hadith, he said, "Ar-rajul ala dini khalili." A person will follow the faith of his companion. فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مِنْ يُخَالِفْ. So let each one of you be carefully consider those with whom they associate. The content that you consume, what you watch, who you talk to, what you read, who you run with, as we say. Because that will affect you. Contemplate the first part of the hadith. Ar-rajulu ala dini khalili. A person will follow the faith, the ideology, the belief system of his closest companion. The Prophet, in effect, is basically telling you can lose your religion. You can lose your faith. That fear of losing our religion should be enough for us to what? Should give us pause. Let me really look around me and the people that I associate with and see if I should really be associated with them, and if that is a threat to my religion. You got Muslims, brothers, who associate with non-Muslims. Or even some Muslims, but those Muslims are not really, as we say, on their deen. People who are inconsiderate, they're rude, they're crude, they're belligerent, they use foul language, they listen to music which is filled with depravity, they engage in illicit relationships, they do other haram things, they associate with them anyway. And then they wonder why they themselves are exemplifying the same qualities. Man, why can't I get on my deen? Why can't I? They hang around people who are not committed, and they wonder why they struggle with what? Commitment. The Prophet is telling you why. Ar-rajul adini khalili. A person's going to follow the faith of his companions, of his friends. The reason why we struggle, some of us, is because we're products of our environment, products of the environment in which we choose to dwell, and we're influenced by the company that we choose to to keep. So we got to reflect, as the Prophet is saying, فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مَنْ يُخَالِطُ. Each one of you take stock of the people you associate with. Sit back and look at your contacts. And you know how you, for example, your phone, it tells you, like, for example, you have the frequent contacts, the people you talk to a lot. Sit back and look at that list. And ask yourself, are these the people I really need to associate with? Are these people benefiting me, or are they harming me? I want to digress again, briefly. I want to ask you as a question, you tell me what you think. We've been talking about friends and companions and how they can affect you and influence you. We even talked about how animals that you tend to and care for can affect and influence you. Question here, the statement of the Prophet, does it extend to and include, engulf, does it comprise your spouses? Does it also include a man's wife and a woman's husband? What do you guys think? Yes or no?
Yes.
Is there any no's? Anybody says no? Yeah, it includes it. It has to include it. When the Prophet said, "Ar-rajul ala dini khalili," a person will follow the faith of his friend, talking about people who you associate with every now and again, talking about people who you are like thick as thieves with them, and people who are somewhere in between, right? So if that applies to all these people who are just your friends, how much more does it apply to someone who is with you what? All the time? How can it not apply to someone who you accompany continuously, like your wife or your husband? Look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, how He describes the husband-wife relationship. He says, هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنَّ. He says, they are a garment for you and you are a garment for them. This word garment has a lot of connotations. One of them is lihaf. What is lihaf? It's a wrapper. It's a wrapper, something that's wrapped tightly around something else. Allah describes a man to a woman and a woman to a man like what? Like a wrapper. Means what? It's the closest thing to you, skin to skin. So definitely, what the Prophet is saying, it includes spouses. A person choosing, because that your spouse really ultimately is your best friend. They know you like nobody knows you. They know things about you that your best friend doesn't know about you. They know, all your little secrets, all your idiosyncrasies, right? They know all of that, and you know all about them. So definitely what the Prophet is saying applies. That's why you find the Prophet in other ahadith telling men to be careful who they marry, and women to be careful who they marry. Their guardians to be careful who they marry their daughters or sisters off to. In the case of women, the Prophet told men, he said, "Tunkahu al-mar'a li arba, li maliha, wa li hasabiha, wa li jamaliha, wa li diniha. Fadfar bi dhati ad-din taribat yadak." He said, a woman is typically married for any one of four reasons: her wealth, her lineage, her beauty, or her piety. Marry the religious one, and you'll be blessed. Wa alaikum salam. With respect to men, the Prophet told women and their guardians, he said, إِذَا خَطَبَ إِلَيْكُمْ مَنْ تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ فَزَوِّجُوا إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوا تَكُنْ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ عَرِيضٌ. He said, if you are pleased with the religion and character of a man who proposes to your daughter, to your sister, to a woman under your charge, then marry him to her. You're pleased with his deen, pleased with his character, marry him. If you don't, there will be tribulations in the world and much corruption. And there's a lot of tribulations and corruption right now, and a lot of it has to do with people marrying people because he's rich, because he's my cousin, because he's related somehow to the family, because I owe so-and-so a favor. Marrying for the wrong reasons, and the results what? In a lot of corruption and a lot of tribulations and a lot of trials, and a lot of divorces and broken families, etc. I want to close now, brothers and sisters, with the second half of the hadith, kind of putting that under the microscope, contemplating it. And that's where the Prophet said, فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مَنْ يُخَالِمُ. So that each one of you carefully consider his friends, choose his friends wisely, look around you and see the people you're associating with, and carefully reflect upon whether or not they're good for you or bad for you. There's a lot of wisdom in this part of the hadith. And the wisdom can be seen from a number of angles. I'm going to mention 3 angles. I guess you could say 3 rationales for the Prophet saying what he said. So the first wisdom, or the first angle of the wisdom, is that friends, the Prophet is saying, be careful who you choose your friends. Why? Because friends apply pressure. If they're good friends, they apply good pressure. Come on, man, let's go to the masjid and get this tarawih. Right? You weren't going to go. But your friend says, come on, let's go. And what do you end up doing? You go. He says, come on, man, let's fast on Monday, me and you. And I'll take you out to dinner afterwards. Applying what? Good pressure. What? You going to feed me? Oh, yeah, I got that. I'm going to fast. Right? They apply what? Good pressure. If you have bad friends, they apply what? Bad pressure. Come on, man, let's go to the club. Come on, man. Let's go buy some cigarettes. Let's go play the lottery, man. Man, the jackpot right now is like 10 million or something like that. Bad friends apply what?
Bad pressure.
Bad pressure. That's why the Prophet said, be careful who you are, who you associate as friends. During the time of the Prophet, ﷺ, and just to give an example of this good pressure, Abu Bakr, we know that he was one of the first and foremost to what? To give charity and to basically have the Prophet's back financially. And his willingness to give and be at the forefront of giving, it put pressure on the other companions to do what? To try to get up to that level. And there's a famous hadith where Umar, he said that the Prophet, he said, I used to compete with Abu Bakr in everything. I never could beat him in anything. He said, but one time the Prophet made a call for charity to fund an expedition. And it just so happened at that time I had a lot of money. A lot of money saved up. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to beat Abu Bakr today. So he said he went home. He said divide his wealth in half. He left half for his family and brought half to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when he brought the wealth, there was so much, the Prophet said, what did you leave for your family? He said, I left mithlo. Just like this, Messenger. I gave them half and I gave you half. So Abu Bakr came. Just drops this big load of charity. Far more than what Umar had brought. So the Prophet said, what did you leave for your family? He said, Taraktu lahum Allah wa Rasulah. He said, I left them with Allah and His Messenger. And Umar said, see, I'm never going to compete with you no more. But I mention that to say that Abu Bakr and Umar, we know that they were what? They were very close. They were very good friends. And Abu Bakr was doing what for Umar? Applying good pressure. You guys see that? Like the second angle of the wisdom of the Prophet saying, فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مَنْ يُخَالِلْ, let one of you consider closely who he takes as a friend, is that friends have a tendency to do what? To follow their friends. Is that not so? You have a tendency to go where your friends go. And if your friends go in the wrong direction, they follow misguidance, you'll do what? You'll follow right behind. It's another reason why the Prophet said, be careful with your friend, because you might follow them down the path of misguidance. If we're looking for support for the first 2 angles that I mentioned, look no further than the famous hadith collected by Bukhari on the authority of Sa'id ibn Musayyib. In that hadith, he mentions how the Prophet ﷺ, he went to the deathbed of Abu Talib, his uncle, his beloved uncle, who had defended him and defended Islam probably more than many Muslims, although he was a non-Muslim. Wa alaikum salam. And the Prophet had been trying this whole time to convince Abu Talib to be Muslim. This was his last opportunity. So he went. He found out that he was sick on his deathbed, rushed to his bedside. But when he got there, he found two people from the pagans of Quraysh. They were Abd'Llah ibn Abi Umayyah and Abu Jahl. So the Prophet ﷺ, he was undaunted. I'm going to give my dawah. So he gave his dawah. He said, Ey Am, قل لا إله إلا الله كلمة أحاج لك بها عند الله يوم القيامة. He said, Abu Talib, my uncle, my dear uncle, he said, say La ilaha illallah. A word that if you say it, I will be able to argue on your behalf on the day of judgment. Just say these words, and I'll be able to argue on your behalf. Without these words, I won't have a leg to stand on. Yarhamukallah. But if you say these words, I can argue on your behalf. But Abdullah here, Ibn Abi Umayyah, and Abu Jahl, they weren't going to let that go. They weren't going to leave it there. They had to push back and put pressure. So they told Abu Talib, they said, are you going to deny and forsake the religion of your forefathers? And implicitly say that they were upon falsehood and misguidance? Are you going to shame them and shame their name? Are you going to do that? They were putting pressure on them. They said what they said. The prophets repeated what he said. They went back and forth until finally, Abu Talib, he said, هو على ملة عبد المطلب وأبى أن يقول لا إله إلا الله. So his last breath, he says that he is upon the religion of Abdul Muttalib, the religion of shirk, and he refused to say La ilaha illallah, and he died. So this is an example, a practical example of what we talked about. Friends applying pressure, and a friend following their friend into what? Into misguidance. The last wisdom I want to mention, the last angle of the wisdom of what the Prophet said I want to mention, is that if you have a friend that's a good friend, then you are going to invariably benefit from that friend. Sometimes you benefit directly, and sometimes you may benefit indirectly, but you're going to always benefit from that friend. But if you have a bad friend, then you are going to almost invariably be harmed by that bad friend, sometimes directly and sometimes indirectly. وَيَدُلِّ ذَلِكَ, and this is evidenced by the famous hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَثَلُ الْجَلِيسِ الصَّالِحِ وَالْجَلِيسِ السُّوءِ كَحَامِلِ الْمِسْكِ وَنَافِخِ الْكِيرِ. فَحَامِلَ الْمِسْكِ إما أن يحذيك وإما أن تبتاع منه وإما أن تجد منه ريحا طيبة. وأما نافخ الكير فإما أن يحرق ثيابك وإما أن تجد منه ريحا كريها. So in this famous hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said the likeness of the good companion and the bad one is the likeness of the fragrance merchant and the ironsmith. The fragrance merchant, the good friend, is always going to benefit you in some way. Either he's going to just gift you something. He's like, I got a new fragrance. I got some free samples. Take this. Or you're going to buy some. Or at the very least, when you're in his shop and in his company, you're going to smell something sweet. You're going to benefit directly or indirectly. وَنَافِخِ الْكِيرِ, but if you have a bad friend, you're going to be harmed. Either he's going to burn your clothes. You in there just chopping it up with him. Yeah, man, so I was down, like, oh my God. Oh, what happened? He's going to what? He's going to hit that iron. A spark is going to come off. It's going to land on your clothes and put a hole in your garment. Or you're sitting there, again, chopping it up, This time you don't get burned, but you leave the shop and you look down and your clothes are covered in what? In soot. Or at the very least, when you're in his company, you smell an awful smell. You're either going to harm you directly or indirectly. So, I know, Yahimullah Ta'ala, when he commented on this hadith, I'll just say that briefly to close. He said this hadith, it basically prohibits associating with those who associating with them will either be harmful to you in your religion or harmful to you in your worldly life. And so this gives us the yardstick by which we say, which ones are the friends I should keep and which are the friends I should cut loose. Somebody who's helping me in my deen or helping me in my worldly life while not hurting me in my deen. Those are the friends I keep. But if you're hurting me in my deen or helping me in my worldly life while hurting me in my deen, let alone if you're not helping me in the deen or in the dunya, then I don't need to associate with you. And with that, brothers and sisters, we bring our short talk, our few words on friendship and keeping good company to a close. Are there any questions, comments, or critiques? Huh? Repeat? The whole thing? No, we can't. Why you see it? But it's on Facebook though, so you can watch it, inshallah. That was good. That was a good one though. It was a good try. You had a question, I think?
Yeah, I was wondering, is that hat from Ethiopia?
This hat? Somebody gifted this to me. I wish I knew where it was from because I want to get more of them. Yeah, this is my favorite type of hat.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Going once? Going twice? The next class? Tomorrow at 7:15, inshallah.
So tomorrow we have class?
We've been saying it. You need to sign up for the emails, brother. Because we're announcing it in Jumu'ah and people are just not. Huh?
I'm getting on.
No, you can't use old as an excuse, brother. You're not paying attention. That's what it is. But no, inshallah, every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, without fail, there'll be a talk at around 7:15. Hopefully something light like this. I hope this was light. I hope you don't consider this too heavy or too intense. And there may be scattered throughout the week. There's no guarantee. Because I think the Sheikh did do one or two last week during the week. But the guarantee is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Please be with us here in the masjid if you can. If you can't, meet us on Facebook. And with that, we'll bring this to a close. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Yes, sir.